Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, my name is Giorgos Papatheodoridis, and I'm a professor in medicine and gastroenterology at the Medical School of the National Kapodistrian University of Athens. I work at Lyko General Hospital, where I chair the first academic department of gastroenterology and a liver transplant unit, and I'm also the chair of the Hellenic Transplant Organization. So, welcome to this very interesting roundtable, which is, as you heard, on MedTech Disruptors, from concept to cure, or Biotech Frontiers. Before we start, I would like to thank Mr. Kirpidis and the organizing committee for this very kind invitation, for organizing this, I hope, very interesting roundtable. And over the past decade, I'm sure you all agree that biotechnology and medical technologies have not only been transformed how we treat, but also how we think about prevention, about personalized care and human health as a whole, and from cell and gene therapies to transplantation advances, from corporate strategies that bring innovation to patients, to frontier medicine in space exploration. The boundaries of what's possible is being pushed every day. But innovation is never just about discovery. It's about navigating through a regulatory mechanism and challenges, built-in collaborations between researchers, clinics, and industry, and at the end enduring that bold ideas ultimately reach patients where we care most. So by that, I would like to introduce our exceptional leaders who will participate in this roundtable, and I will start with the lady of the group, Mrs. Limberis. Is she here? Okay. Mrs. Limberis, let me use my glasses. Age does not come alone, sorry. Mrs. Limberis is a consultant and editor of human gene therapy, previously a professor at Penn University, and more recently vice president research at Spyridonidis, with an emphasis on the preclinical development of gene therapy for rare and ultra-rare genetic diseases. Professor Limberis brings a global perspective on gene therapy and scientific publishing. So, coming to our male panelists by alphabetical order, although I may not ask you by alphabetical order, but for now, I will ask for Dr. Adrianos Golemis. Okay, good afternoon. Who is European Space Agency, ESA's lead flight surgeon at the Astronaut European Center in Cologne, Germany, who will share how frontier medicine in space can inspire innovation here on Earth. Then Mr. Dimitris Nikas. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome. Who is the chairman of the Association of Health and Research Biotechnology Industry and the managing director of Medtronic Greece, who can speak to how global medtech pioneers integrate disruptive technologies into healthcare system. And last but not least, a friend, Professor Alexandros Spyridonidis, who is a professor of hematology, who leads a very successful bone marrow donation center, but today we are interested in his clinical activities. So for that, he is the director of the Bone Marrow Transplant Unit and Institute of Cell Therapy at the University of Patras, bringing insight into the future of advanced therapies, especially in hematological diseases. So together, they represent the breadth of perspectives from science and clinical practice to global industry to the outer limits of human exploration. And with that, let's start, let's dive in and explore what it really takes to go from a visionary concept to a transformative solution for human health. So, our lady again, Professor Limberis, first question, from your vantage point in publishing and gene therapy, how do you see the most promising disruptive technologies in biotech and medtech being communicated to the global scientific and clinical community, and how often, how easily they may be implemented in practice?
Okay, I think this is on. Yep. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking the organisers, and it's a delight to be part of this panel. So what I'll share is the perspective of both the scientist and also how we view new findings or scientific findings in the context of regulatory submissions, for example, and how to convey that to both the public, the funding agencies, the companies out there, as well as those that will ultimately be the ones that will approve the gene therapies. So what we had decided very early on, especially with the Human Gene Therapy Journal, was when it came to research studies, and this is where I think for the youngest scientists in this field is very, very important, because I come from a generation that negative data is no data. There's no point in publishing it. So this has somewhat changed in that any data, whether it's positive or negative, should be published, and that's specifically important when it comes to studies that are of translational nature. So anything to do with, for example, IND-enabling studies, something that will go into eventually the clinic. So what human gene therapy had done quite early on, especially as it's dealt with genetic therapies, mainly adeno-associated virus-based gene therapies, was to find a way to minimize the number of animals that were going to be used in these gene therapies or the assessment of gene therapies prior to preclinical and non-clinical development, and that was by publishing. So what we had done, and this obviously comes from before my time, was to any IND-enabling studies that were conducted under GLP in support of a particular program, whether it was to target the retina or the liver or the muscle or the lung, would get published. Then it will be cited by the FDA so that you would not have to repeat certain types of safety studies. Any type of adverse event, any type of a case study, whether it was an animal, a large animal, not a mouse or a rat, but anything to do with a dog, a cat, or a non-human primate, would be published immediately and disseminated immediately. And of course, anything to do with a human clinical trial. So we have an open forum where we try to publish information in a very rapid way as it pertains to the safety, not so much the efficacy, but the safety of a gene therapeutic.
Okay, so thank you for that. Second question, again for you, we start with each panelist, all the questions together, and then if we have time, we may have some general questions for all of you. So do you think Greece can participate in the innovation process? And if yes, what do you think that Greece and even other countries need to understand better about publishing, about transparency, regulatory expectations, if they want their work to gain international credibility and impact?
In terms of publishing, so I'll tackle the easiest part of that question. In terms of publishing, there's absolutely no doubt that Greece can absolutely participate in that. In terms of conducting studies in support of clinical trials, that is a little bit more of a difficult question to answer, right? Because the actual conduct of those studies, the regulatory agencies and whatnot, I think what can happen is if those studies or case studies are published, then the Greek government or whoever oversees the conduct of either preclinical, non-clinical and clinical studies become more and more informed. That will add a lot more weight in the conduct of clinical trials, especially when it relates to more complex clinical trials in Greece.
Okay, and I cannot resist of not taking advantage of your main scientific interest. So could you please summarize the state of gene therapy for rare genetic diseases, which are prevalent in Greece, like thalassemia, for example, and the need for specialized centers here in our country to tackle these diseases?
Yeah, I will start by saying it's an amazing time to be in the gene therapeutic space, and I'm sure the younger scientists in the audience would appreciate this. The leaps and bounds that the field of gene therapy has gone in the last 5 to 10 years has been incredible. So where children will be born with ultra-rare genetic diseases, for example, spinal muscular atrophy type 1, in a very short amount of time, a vector that actually came out of our lab, AAV9, was able to basically treat this disease. So the brains are in Greece. The infrastructure needs to be built, obviously, But there is potential, and I strongly believe that there's a potential for gene therapeutic applications in Greece, not so much to treat patients, because I think that that can be done in any specialized center in the world and in Europe, as it's done now, especially with thalassemia in Greece, but to actually bring some of these gene therapeutics in-house in Greece for diseases that are prevalent in the Greek population and not so prevalent in other populations worldwide.
Okay, thank you very much. We may come back to you later. So, Mr. Nikas, as a gastroenterologist, we very often have collaborations with companies like Medtronic, for example, but you have a more broader vision of the problems in Greece. So as head of Medtronic in Greece, how do you see disruptive MedTech solutions being integrated into the healthcare system here in our country? How easily can they be implemented? Because we want this, you want this, but very often we don't find the way for implementation. And what are the key enablers and obstacles in this effort?
So again, I'm repeating, thank you for the invitation. And it is the first time I'm attending this very nice congress, and I'm really pleased. I want to start to answer your question by saying that sometimes it is very easy to adopt the innovation and disruptive technology in Greece, and sometimes it is very difficult because the fact is that we don't have a clear route, a clear adoption route of new technology in Greece. So, as you are a gastroenterologist, you know that you can go to a congress, see a nice medical device. The day after you go back to your hospital, you may ask your hospital, okay, can we procure this device? They might say yes, if the CEO of the hospital is open to that. They might say no, we don't have the money. So there are not clear process of how we adopt innovation. But I want to say that recently we have made some progress on that. First of all, by talking about HTA, Health Technology Assessment, for medical devices, find a different way to reimburse medical devices. I mean, working with payers like AOP on that. And third thing is that we start talking about what we call value-based healthcare. So for Medtronic, I can say there are 4 areas that we work together with the hospitals in order to make available our innovation to patients and to, of course, to healthcare professionals. The first is OR, cath lab, with robotics, with AI enabled. Secondly is the chronic disease like cardiac disease, diabetes, prevention and primary care, and also what we call the triage of patients, the operations in the hospital, where we see the most inefficient area of Greek hospitals. So there's a lot of things to do there. It is a challenge, but at the same time is an opportunity. So coming for the enablers, as I explained before, one of the things that really is an issue is the clear process of reimbursement. Second, this can be an enabler. Of course, what we call value-based healthcare agreements, so agreements that we will be reimbursed based on the outcomes. Third, the infrastructure of the hospitals to run some clinical trials and the legal framework. And fourth is the adoption by the system, a different approach about financing budget or silo budget, not based on combination between OPEX and CAPEX. So those are the enablers that I see, and if we can make a change here, we might be able to change the whole environment and easily implement new technology, new devices, innovation in healthcare system.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to make just a comment and staying on what you said, that the CEO of the hospital may say yes or may say no, because this is very, very critical for us, the doctors, the physicians, and we feel sometimes that there is no objective way of deciding for which device, because there is a competition. We ask a device, the surgeon asks a device, the gynecologist asks devices, so everybody is asking devices and the budget is fixed. So this is a very tricky part.
It is true because there's no clear process of how we integrate into the system a new medical device.
Yes. Okay, we'll see. So how can global medtech leaders like Medtronic collaborate with local startups, hospitals, policymakers to accelerate innovation and improve patient access to advanced therapies in Greece? And is the Greek environment really helpful in this direction, in this effort?
Yeah, there are a few good things and things to be improved. First of all, I'll start with what has been done so far in terms of data, in terms of what we call organization or structures that they have worked a lot on IT, on e-prescription. IDICA, for instance, is a good example. So IDICA has done enormous progress for the last few years. This is a good thing. Second, in Greece we have a variety of geography, so there's no easily access to health care providers by people that are sitting in an island, living in Crete or in other areas. So this is also an opportunity for us. The other thing that I see also is that, as I said before, in the hospital, there's a lot of inefficiency. So again, opportunity to build on that inefficiencies and create new solutions for the patient management, for patient pathways. How I see it, first of all, I'm in favor of creating a local ecosystem for, medical device and startup. Medical device or medtech companies are the most innovative companies, and they have many patents, so they can work together in a kind of venture client, for instance, mode, together with the venture capitalists, with the startups, being the first customers for startups, working at a small scale like a hospital. So in Greece, this is manageable, so we don't have a big market, but we have a small market where we can have the first use, the first implementation of the ideas. Secondly, the medtech companies, they are very good in and they know they have the quality system, they have the quality management system, they have the clinical trials expertise, they have the distribution channels, so they can cooperate with the startups at that level. And the third is what I said before about the geography of Greece and the solution that they can together work a startup with a meta company.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move to Professor Spyridonidis. So, Professor Spyridonidis, as someone leading a bone marrow transplant and cell therapy unit, what do you see as the most promising opportunities for cell and gene therapies to transform patient outcomes in hematology and oncology, I would say?
Thank you. First, I'm very privileged to be here. Although I don't feel very old, I had the opportunity to experience the expansion of bone marrow transplantation and also the very good collaboration all over the world with the transplants, which maybe all of you know here, bone marrow produces every day 500 billion cells and up to 20 billion lymphocytes, which are the immune system. And I had the opportunity to experience this expansion we're using now, and we are making many transplants. But now I'm facing another experience. We see another innovation, which is the cell therapies. We managed to take these immune cells outside from bone marrow or from the blood and to ex vivo reproduce them or redirect them against hematological malignancies first, because very easy to find them, they're in the blood, but also solid tumors. So the cell therapies are here. We are using them also in Greece, and they will expand, and they are expanding every day and every day. So although now we have, there's a standard for many hematological malignancies, for example, lymphomas, lymphoblastic leukemias, I'm sure what is happening now, the opportunities that we have that every cell to take it and to manipulate it as we wish, we can target it against many diseases, for example, solid cancers. Now we have many trials in glioblastoma, autoimmunity, and so on and so on. So we don't only have the CAR T cells, we have CAR NK cells, we have T regulatory cells, we have virus-specific T cells, we have mesenchymal stem cells, and so on and so on. And I also believe, as my previous speaker said, the future or the today's gene-informed approaches to manipulate the cells to perform drugs what we want and to use them against any diseases like cancer or autoimmunity.
So you already mentioned other types of CAR cells, not just CAR T cells. So how soon do you foresee the use of other types of CAR cells?
They are there.
To be used? Are they coming next year, in 3-4 years? And what will be the burden for the authorities? So Hellenic Transplant Organization, will it have to take some regulations?
Okay, what's happened is that, as I said, I'm a hematologist, and we're using blood cells, like platelets, also blood-derived cells, but we are using also bone marrow cells, which are not drugs. But now if we take this and we manipulate it ex vivo, these are drugs. So it became very expensive. That's why we have now the CAR T cells. This is manipulated cells against some malignancies, which are drugs, and it's other regulations, and that's why it's also very expensive. We have not only the CAR T cells, we have the TILs, tumor-infiltrated lymphocytes against the tumors. We have mesenchymal stem cells for regenerative medicine. We have virus-specific T cells against viruses, for example, COVID. We have whatever you can, let's say, not imagine. Now with gene-informed approaches, we can take the immune cells, manipulate them against what you want. The problem as I see is, I don't know if it's a problem, is that, as I said, up to now, we hematologists could use the cells easily, also like, as I said, in blood transfusion, red blood cells, lymphocytes, and so on, platelets, and these were not drugs. Now these are drugs. That means they're very strictly regulated. For example, if we want to produce it ourselves, and we can do that, we hematologists have this, we can do that, but we need to have GMP manufacturing facilities, which is like a pharma company. For example, we have in Patras a GMP, UDRA GMP licensed facility, which is licensed to produce such advanced therapeutic medicinal products. But it was really very hard to get this license. So they came from the National Organization of Drugs, and we were auditors like a pharma company. So it's not easy to do it everywhere. But I foresee in the future, and maybe it will happen, like I say, as we did it with the transfusion medicine, that we manage in the hospital to produce the blood products and to give it directly to the patients. We call it for point of care. Why not envision in the future we'll have CAR therapies or T-cell therapies that are produced point of care. They will be gene-informed. I truly believe that NGS gene information will come in that. And so we'll have the patient, and we could maybe in the future, in the hospital, personalize specific for this patient, produce the T-cell or a cell that he needs for his disease. And of course, there are also the gene diseases. We have also gene diseases for thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, and so on and so on. So we will have probably hybrid transplants together with cell and gene therapy. But cell and gene therapy will be an important component of every therapeutic protocol.
So can all this be done in Greece, or the cycle of these cell therapies, and which are the biggest hurdles you think you face in bringing these highly innovative but complex therapies into our real life, in here, into our clinical practice, and how can Greece build the infrastructure to support them? And again, as Mr. Nikas, is our environment here and our regulations helpful in this effort?
I was very provocative and I said we hematologists can do that. So, but of course we have to adhere to the strict criteria, regulatory standards, which are now European standards. So we don't have Greek standards, like Israel has its own standards, China has its own standards, even UK has its own standards, which are now close very together, but we have to adhere to the European regulations. These are not easy. You know, Europe is a little bit slow in all these things. So to have the model from Spain that they managed to produce their own cells for their patients, their own T cells, their own CAR T cells for the patients, so they don't need to send the cells abroad in another company and so on, but they produce it, we call it point of care. We can do it here, it's no problem. The problem is the regulation. There is a law in Europe, it's called hospital exemption rule. I hope that also very close in the future will be also a law in Greece for that. And the other problem is who pays. So this is a drug. Is the hospital wants to pay all this, or does the hospital wants to pay the procedure to produce this? And we can do that because nowadays we have medical devices, which are closed systems, which are very good regulated. So as I said, it's easy to produce these cells, it's easy to produce these therapies, but we need also that the hospitals, the CEOs, the government sees that we can do that they allow us, of course, under regulations, and also to clear out who pays. Is it because there's a drug? And of course, if you have also the pharma company who produces the same drug, which is competitive, it's always a problem. If you can do it alone, but there's a pharma company who pays as a drug, so it has to be regulated for which patient, what we're doing, and so on. As I say, envision in the future that we will need not only, as now we have 3 or 4 or 5 drugs which are licensed as T-cell therapies, we will have gene-informed approaches for every patient, personalized, point-of-care produced, his cell therapy against his tumor, his autoimmune disease, his gene deficit, and so on and so on. This is the future. I'm not sure that I'm going to see that, but if I realize that I experienced the expanse of transplant and now experiencing what's happening, it's a boom of cell and gene therapies, why not, together with the IE?
Yeah, I agree. We may not see that for all diseases, but it's here already for some. So
maybe I'm always too optimistic.
Yes. Okay. And since we're talking about the future, let's go to space now. So, Dr. Golemis, as ESA's lead flight surgeon, you are the frontier of medicine in space. So, what MedTech or biotech innovations developed for astronauts do you see having the biggest potential impact for healthcare here on Earth? So, is there a chance of
I hope
getting
there is.
benefit?
Indeed, and let me also start with an Efcharisto. Thank you very much. I'm very happy and thankful to be on the panel and in this important event that is organized in our country. So thank you. As you said, actually, space medicine may sound like the future, but it's connected and rooted in the present. And actually, to answer your question, I would start by saying that when you send people to space, the physiology changes. And the perspective of space medicine has to do with attention to detail and prevention. To be frank, for me, ideally, in a dream world, every human being would have healthcare with this approach. So to prevent as much as you can, rather than wait for it to happen and treat, and also to pay attention to as many details as you can. Now, I'm saying that because Coming to your question, of course, we do research. Myself, I'm mainly on the medical care part, so we actually do the medical checks and we treat as needed the astronauts before, during, and after the space flight. But of course, we collaborate with researchers and with MedTech. So everything we do in space has an objective to also improve life on the Earth and in patients in hospitals. And we can identify some areas that are really very closely tied. One of them is aging. So as you may know, if we go to space actually and spend some time there, our bones would start losing minerals and density. Now, if you have had your bone density checked, that was probably by a 3D PQCT, or DEXA or 3D PQCT, and the 3D PQCT is a technique and device that has been refined or improved thanks to the needs of spaceflight. And of course, we use it clinically on the ground. Similar for your muscles. So actually, if you go in orbit, you would not use your muscles even to sit or stand. So part of them would start developing atrophy. And we have some experiments, or rather tech demos, that you actually ask astronauts to put some devices on their back and see if we can activate the muscles of the back to prevent that atrophy. Of course, then we can use it for example, bedridden patients in the hospital. So this is an area that is really linked between the two. I would add autonomy. So now we have astronauts that we send to space to do research just around the Earth. If we go further, for example, to the moon, as is the plan, they will need to be more autonomous. And my direct employer, Medis, in Toulouse, they have proposed an experiment that you actually, and this is very much a MedTech experiment, you actually try to have a precise guidance of an ultrasound. You create a smart ultrasound. Why do you do that? Because an astronaut may not be a medical doctor, they may not be trained on how to conduct a precise ultrasound to their fellow crew member that may be in danger. But with this device, actually, a person that has very basic training can do that. Now, of course, you can extend this to remote areas, and we're in Greece. We know that sometimes in the islands and in other remote areas, you may not have medical doctors in the field. So by leveraging the knowledge that we develop for space, we can increase our autonomy on the ground. And I would also add portability. So if you go to space, you need devices that are more portable. And with that in mind, the European Space Agency has co-developed a device that does nothing too innovational. So actually we measure vital signs. It's a defibrillator as well, but it is very compact, it is portable, and you can transfer data confidentially. So actually we advance along the way to that. Very briefly, I would add that, of course, we're talking about MedTech, but we should not neglect the importance of basic science. And the two are connected. Sometimes we think that they're in competition. For us, very recently, it was discovered that astronauts that actually go to space, so these are individuals who have double and triple checked on the medical side. They are very healthy. So we send them to space, and some of them develop thrombosis in their jugular veins. That was really nothing that we ever expected. And now there is some basic research on it, so I don't know the answer. I don't know the MedTech or the medication that can take care of that. But again, when we do develop that, hopefully, we can use it for bedridden patients in hospitals. So from space to ground.
Okay, so there's hope that we may benefit something from space medicine. So space missions push the limits of human endurance. And from your perspective, how can research in extreme environments inspire disruptive solutions in personalized medicine and healthcare innovation more broadly, not just for space?
Yes, thank you. And I would say it's kind of a two-way relationship, because we, the medical team, we want to get the latest and greatest that MedTech has to offer and use it into space for monitoring or treatment, if we can. But it's the other way around as well. So sometimes you have the need to cover medical monitoring in space, and you don't have the device. So this actually encourages the development and innovation to enable that. So I would say, yeah, how is this enabled by space to create innovation for the ground? Two things. First of all, I would mention constraints. In an extreme environment, not only space, I had the chance to work for a year in Antarctica in isolation, and there, of course, the resources you have are much more controlled. So I'm a medical doctor, of course, I would like to have an MRI device in space. You just can't do that. You cannot afford the volume, and you cannot afford the energy. So actually, the enabler is it puts you back in your seat of creative thinking okay, I want this capability, but I need to rethink how to do it more efficiently. And I think this is actually it's not something we see directly, but it does advance medical technology along the way. So constraints, it's actually helpful and not detriment. And the other part of that is spin-offs. So spin-offs are technologies that we do not intentionally develop for this purpose. We happen upon them because of another need, but then we say, that's actually a great idea that could be developed, that could be, further developed and applied in a different area. If you ever had a robotic surgery, I hope not, but part of the algorithm that governs the robotic arm has again been refined thanks to the robotic arm technologies in space. We do not talk about robotic surgery in space. We talk about robotic arms that are extremely precise in order to perform very subtle actions outside of the spacecraft. So this has been fed back to the medical technology on the ground, and we all benefit from it. I also like to mention another example that is, again, indirect. JPL, this is one of the NASA centers that supports spaceflight. We all remember the COVID pandemic, so at some point they switched off their space hat and they put on their medical innovation hat, and they developed in 37 days respirator for COVID. That was the area before the vaccine when we were losing people very rapidly due to, in the end, lack of resources. And in space and in many other fields, you can actually have teams of people that can think creatively, innovatively, and they just redirected that purpose, and they developed a respirator that was more efficient, cheaper, and it could be distributed much more quickly. So in the end, they saved lives thanks to this undesired, if you will, capability.
So thank you very much, Dr. Golemis. I think we have some time for general questions, or we may have questions from the audience, and then we go for the general questions. So, yeah. There's a question over there.
Professor Spyridonidis, dear Alexandros, having established and operating a first center in University of Patras Medical School that you direct and lead with your in-house GMP manufacturing facility. You mentioned about hospital exemption regulatory framework that is being well expected from all of us. And as a leader into investigator-initiated trials, what are the opportunities as we will be working to identify the payer-patient mix for medical tourism attraction, which is something the Minister of Health is strongly promoting, and apart from the dental services and in vitro fertilization that seem to be the leading revenue streams, that could also be a new channel.
I was very provocative before, and I said we can do everything, but the problem is who pays. So also hospital exemption is a framework that we need so that we treat our patients, and also it's an excellent framework also for medical tourism that came here. But again, it's when we produce the cells, who's paying for that? With medical tourism, maybe they pay from their insurance and so on. But if we need also to make phase 1 or phase 2 trials, we need somebody that he pays for that, for these trials. It's not easy. They're very expensive. You need so many regulations, CROs, and so on and so on. But if you see it, as I said, a perfect example is Spain. They started point of care, they built their own GMP, they made their drug, their CAR-T cell, they made the phase 1-2 studies. This was sponsored by research funding and also by Ministry of Health. And now they produce it point of care with their medical devices, and they give it to the patient, and instead of its treatment costing 300,000 euros, which is nowadays the price, it costs only 30,000 euros or 40,000 euros. So if a government or the Ministry of Health wants to see it globally, not to only patients, to see how can I handle that at the end I offer all of these treatments to my patients here in Greece, they have to innovate leave free room to the investigators here to make their own treatments, their own drugs, let's say their own CAR T cells, but they have to support them also the regulatory framework, and also, as I said, the payer, who's paying. As I said before, you can have another example, is don't pay it as a drug, but pay it as a process. We also have this opportunity that we don't pay, the insurance doesn't pay because you produce something, but because you're doing all the process, which costs. And in the end, you can pay for that. So it's a big opportunity to do that. The first example here, you said, is, and that's why maybe they're very innovative. In Germany, they have a rule before the hospital exemption that every hospital is allowed to make up to 10 or 12 innovative therapies, of course, if they have the facilities, what they think it's good for their patients. So that's why they made also many new treatments, for example, autoimmune diseases, treatment of autoimmune diseases with CAR T cells that we could not do here. We can only start now with clinical trials. So as you see, if you create a framework that allows you, it gives you free room to make that, then it will be good for the ecosystem here in Greece.
If I may add something on this, I'm not an hematologist, I'm not familiar with these therapies, but I'm very familiar with the hospital regulations. So I think the biggest challenge for tourism or whatever for bringing patients to a hospital for these expensive therapies are the way that the hospitals work. So they don't care if you bring profit, they care if you spend money, even if this money brings profit. So for these expensive therapies, they are not very friendly. So they don't like, they have a certain budget of expenses, and they don't care about the incomes. So this is very strange, it has to change, but this is what is happening for now. So, any other question? Please.
Over here.
I can't give you my.
I would like to ask Mr. Nikas, how much of the Medtronic annual budget goes to R&D in Greece?
First of all, let's define what is R&D, because in Greece we don't have R&D in the sense of, labs that they can, or researchers that they work on solutions. So our budget goes directly to two areas. One is the local ERPs, external research projects, which are funded by us. The second is clinical trials that we bring to the country. So I can tell you that last year we had something like 10 million out of 120 million of revenue that went to this kind of project in Greece. So, but it varies from years to years, and it varies also from clinicals to clinical trials, because if we have a new product that we have to launch and to run, then, and the centers, there are centers in Greece that they can complete a clinical trial. It is not easy always, I can tell you that, to get all the approvals and then to run the clinical trials. Then it can go higher. I can tell you that this year we're going to run the first in-human study in Greece for Medtronic, which is a milestone for us, for Medtronic in Greece.
Thank you.
I need one clarification. The stellar panel of the gentleman yesterday and this morning, I think, alluded to the fact that it's probably unrealistic to found a startup in Greece that will deal with drug development because of all the process. What you're saying is that gene therapy would be easier for a startup to deal with, where clinical trials can take place in Greece?
So I presume it's for me, directed to me. I would say it's not easier, especially in Greece. I think it would be a lot more challenging because you would have to re-educate a lot of those that are in the regulatory agencies, not so much the scientists that are around, but those that are in the regulatory agencies. I think the the world of gene therapy opened in Greece with AAV9 for SMA, right? So when that became, it was for spinal muscular atrophy, right? So when that became a treatment and it's already come to Greece from Novartis, and the Greek population can actually see the impact of those young boys that were babies that couldn't move to now being young boys and toddlers that can actually walk again. And that sort of brought back the urgency of a regulatory agency that can oversee the development and the sort of transition into the clinical path for genetic therapies, right? Especially for those ultra-rare genetic diseases, which we don't have many in Greece, but for which time is of the essence. You don't really have time to go back and forth with regulatory agencies in Greece, again, because we're talking about this particular country, but because time is of the essence. By the time you get the okay, for example, and again, I'm using SMA as an example, if you were to wait to get the okay and that okay came 6 or 12 months later, it's a moot point. That baby is not going to regain function. It's going to be disabled and it's going to live a very shortened life. However, if you were to aggressively go in and treat that baby within its first year or 2 years of life, then you would see this impact of a better quality and improved lifespan of that child. So again, I think it's as gene therapy and genetic therapies are showing their impact and bringing it back to Greece, I think it will be something that the regulatory agencies will be more open to these, to seeing gene therapies becoming available sooner rather than being stuck in the regulatory hurdles.
If there is no other question from the floor, I have we have 10 minutes. Sorry, I don't, okay. You had a question, sorry, I didn't realize that, sorry.
No, it's
Because
okay.
you were
It's
just
okay.
holding the mic. Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon. I have a question for Mr. Golemis. Mr. Golemis, there has been a proposal actually in June this year about a new European Space Act in order to have a harmonized regulatory framework across Europe and actually to boost competitiveness across the EU. Do you see any chance that Greece would have a chance in the field of healthcare here?
Thank you for the question and the microphone. I think I'll just take a step back. Space in Europe, when we talk about space in Europe, we can talk about two different institutions. We have the European Space Agency, for which I work. This is an intergovernmental organization that implements science and several other parts. And we have the European Union with its own agency that does Earth observation and, again, some other areas. And, of course, there is a collaboration between the two, but an open call for a new framework from the one does not necessarily mean that all areas, including research and medical, are covered in this one. But again, there is collaboration. I think the essence of the question is what is the case for Greece. I think as a country and as people, I'm speaking for myself and maybe most of the audience, we need to dare and we need to insist and try to be part of the forefront. Of course, not in every area, given the size of our country, but in niche areas, I think there is really value, and this is well-founded. And going to medicine, I also have the privilege of collaborating with the Greek Space Agency, the Hellenic Space Center. And this is now developing, and there is an effort to, for example, bring together, we have the chance to have a quick talk just as I came in, to bring together scientists from Greece, not only scientists, but also startups, or research groups, or institutions like Demokritos, research institutions, that either can or have proposed science for space, mainly in the field of physiology. And of course, this needs to be coordinated and supported by the state in order to be brought into fruition and to bear results. But there are international studies on this. I think the previous speakers touched upon this as well, that every euro, for example, that you spend in research in technological development for space, I'm talking about medicine, but it expands to other areas, it yields a 3 to 4 return. So yes, I think despite the constraints, we need to insist and really try to bring Greece to the forefront from this. And yes, I think there is hope.
I hope I'm not missing anyone who would like to have a question. So, no, probably not. So I have a few general questions for all of you, but we don't have time to discuss all these questions. I will discuss only 2 of them. So starting from Greece's position. So do you think that Greece can become a leader in MedTech and biotech innovation on a global stage? And if yes, what would it take? Okay, we'll start with Adrianos.
I'll take the chance because I think it touches upon the previous question, and I should mention a couple of examples. So just in a year with the Hellenic Space Center, we managed to bring together about 30 startups or researchers that in the field of human and robotic exploration, so including medicine, including MedTech. And there are a few striking examples that we may not be aware of. For example, there is a research team in Thessaloniki that does research in parabolic flights. This is a flight where you actually go in a specific plane that does some free fall. So for a while, you have simulated lack of gravity. And this team has developed a device that actually can, in a non-invasive and very quick way, detect bubbles in your blood. Why do we care? Decompression sickness, so divers and so on and so forth. And also astronauts, because astronauts, when they go out of the spaceship, they go in a chute with lower pressure. So again, this helps you. There are several examples. There is a startup that tries to check your eyes in an autonomous way using a heads-up display. Again, very interesting for astronauts that may not know exactly how to perform the test, but also for children that, if you have a small child that you need to check, it's very difficult to keep them concentrated and so on. So what I'm trying to say is I think there is the potential, there are the brains, there are the ideas in Greece to go to that direction if that is fostered.
Okay.
So yeah, I would echo exactly what you're saying. We have the brains, we have the skilled personnel, we have a lot of brilliant scientists. The majority of them obviously are overseas and doing very, very well. So it's basically bringing the scientists back into Greece, and I know that this is the mission of a lot of people in this room. But the reality is that we also have to have the infrastructure. So you can bring the scientists back, but you want to be, as a scientist, you want to be able, and I speak for myself, you want to be able to innovate or at least lead innovating research. You can't be stifled. So I think that becomes a dialogue, an actual productive dialogue, not a dialogue that you just have for the sake of speaking to the government, but actually putting something in place and using the strengths of those scientists that are overseas and the ones that are here too, to bring something that will benefit not only Greece, especially in the ultra-rare and rare genetic space, and I put thalassemias, for example, being one of them, but also other diseases that can affect the European population.
So Dr. Limberis and Dr. Adrianos work abroad. So for the last 2 of you who work here in Greece, I think there is no doubt that we have the scientific talent. We have experts who would work and scientists, but does really the infrastructure support them in this effort? I think this is the most realistic question for us.
If the question is that can we say, or can we become what the Israeli call a startup nation? Okay, I'm not sure, but there's a but. I think we can benefit from diaspora. We can benefit from the scientific, really strong resources we have locally. It is missing the infrastructure, as you said, but we can start working on the culture of innovation, which does not exist today. And this has to be, really go all over the places and have also in our decision, what we are doing, this innovation thinking. And let's start with that, and then we'll see.
Actually, I was always also in diaspora and came back. And
many years in
Greece. I was 10
now.
years in Germany, and then I came back to Greece, and I saw the differences. And what I see here in Greece, we have fireworks, but not a strategic plan. So, for example, now they are building an excellent anosotherapy building in Papanikolaou Hospital in Thessaloniki, which is disappointing to hear that it was created because a patient talked to our Prime Minister and he said, let's do it. So there is no strategic plan. Of course it's perfect to have that. The same was happened in Patras, the bone marrow transplantation unit. It's not because of the strategic plan. There was no strategic plan. It was because of Greek diaspora or some donators that they wanted to do that. So if you don't make a strategic plan where you want to go, you will not make it here in Greece. I don't want to say because we're a small country, because Israel is also a small country, but he had a strategic plan and he made the point of Middle East. Greece could have also the opportunity to become such an innovator, but without a strategic plan, as I say, I don't see an opportunity to do that. But we always see fireworks, that they are good, and we'll be always very happy, and say always how good the Greek scientists are and how they can do everything, but it will not come at the end for what we need to change the world, not change only us to say we're good.
Yeah, so we need a strategic plan, but we need also to stick and implement the plan, because very often we do have plans, but they stay in paper. So we have a few seconds, but just a very, very brief question about the next frontier. If you had to name, we start with Alexandros, one area of MedTech or Biotech where you expect the next big disruption in the next 5-10 years, what would it be? I will not ask why, just because we don't have time.
Which biotech?
Any.
I mean,
in medicine.
In medicine, cell therapies.
Yes. Okay, cell therapies. Mr. Nikas.
It's a gene-informed cell therapy.
Okay.
From medical devices, what I see is digital and AI.
Digital and AI.
For me, I would say wound healing. I think it's applicable to many different areas, but I think there's so much work that's been done there that I think that will be the next big thing.
And I think AI is a major contender for the win, but I would also like to pick your brains because for space, again, autonomy is important and telepresence is important. And we had actually a medical doctor, a NASA doctor, do medical communication and exam via hologram. This may sound just like sci-fi, but being able to at least see or replicate the body is actually interesting. And if it evolves the right direction, it can be quite game-changing. Thank you.
So, by this, we came to the end of our roundtable. Thank you very, very much, all of the panelists. Thank you, the audience.